So what does this kind of legislation mean for your businesses? Is it an opportunity? Is it a threat?
So in terms of the threat posed by legislation, I think we could all debate whether speed limiters are really going to be a thing, and whether it's not just speed limiters, it's other driver aids and other safety initiatives. And I think in a way it would be hard to rail against those sort of developments, because they're there obviously to improve road safety, and it would be a risky place to be to start sort of countering that. But I don't, in terms of the aftermarket industry, legislation and market forces have always been there for decades, and actually the aftermarket modification industry has been tremendously robust over the years at responding to those changes, and actually it just influences the types of cars we might choose to modify and the types of things that we might do. So I don't think it's ever really been about top speed actually. I think yes, power becomes a point. It might be about acceleration, it might be about handling, how well it stops, how well it sounds, and all those sort of things. And if that influences the way we modify cars in the future, then I don't think much will change in terms of the whole industry. It might, as I say, influence the type of cars that we choose to modify.
So from an IBAC perspective, we don't see that the speed limiting of vehicles is a threat to our product, and while the attributes of handling are still important to the driver, our product is still very relevant.
The threat of adding speed limiters to a car isn't so much something we see as a major challenge. The exhaust can help in a number of ways, both from the sort of performance side of things, still the ability for the car to accelerate quicker, also from the kind of driving experience, the sound of the car and how that feels when you're driving the car has a lot of impact, and that doesn't necessarily mean an impact to top speed, changing that. Also, the other factor in performance and tuning is that a lot of people choose the products for aesthetic reasons as well, and that can be from the exhaust, so changing the look of the vehicle from the rear in the terms of the way the tailpipes look, but also that goes across a number of other products. Like people may choose lowering springs to make the stance of their car look better. They may not just be looking at it from a performance point of view. So there's lots of different ways that the aftermarket parts can be seen and used. So no, don't foresee a big challenge with speed limiters.
I think the impact of a speed limiter on the braking industry won't have much of an impact at all. If you look across the motorsport, so many cars are restricted from an engine performance point of view, or a restrictor on a turbo. As Tom, as a racing driver, will tell you that braking later and braking harder will make you faster.
Yeah, I think this legislation could definitely help the track day market and grassroots motorsport, as the speed gets taken out of road driving. I think people that are looking for that buzz and that performance are going to head towards the tracks, which are a far more suitable environment for it. So this, I think, will be a very healthy boost for motorsport and for the performance industry orientated around track and performance vehicles.
When we talk about the track day market, I don't think that necessarily means it's the end of fun on the road. So if we look at a couple of the cars that big manufacturers have launched recently, two that come to mind are the Toyota GT86 and the Alpine, and both of them, the manufacturers have really focused not on VMAX or top speed, but they're focused a lot on how the car is engaging at lower speeds, almost making it the car for the British B road. From a suspension and handling point of view, do you see that there could be a move towards tuning kits that make a car more engaging for the road rather than that ultimate track performance as well?
Certainly there'll be a greater emphasis upon it. I mean, our kits are designed with enhancing those attributes in mind anyway, but perhaps those that would be focusing on power traditionally may then change their focus to handling, which would be refreshing.
For me personally, we have a nice example with some of our Miltech fleet cars. We have a Volkswagen Up GTI, which is probably one of the sort of early cars that are built around this ethos of fun of driving, but at a slower speed. And I had the pleasure of borrowing this for an extended period of time and used it day to day, and I loved it. It's not really quick, but with the modifications and the Miltech system, it's fun to drive, and you get to shift through 3 or 4 gears before you're ever going to be in trouble. And this, for me, as a coming from a driving point of view, this is a real pleasure. In a very high-powered car, you don't often get to get through that many gears before you're potentially losing your license. So I think this shift is something that can be turned into a positive and actually really enthuse some drivers on the road.
Yeah. And in addition to chairing ITG performance air filters, your other business is JE in improving the performance of Land Rover Defenders, which some people haven't thought of as a performance car, but people are buying because they're fun on the road.
Yes, one of the consequences of lots of driver aids and things like speed limiters is that people are looking to older cars as the cars they enjoy driving. They might use a modern car for commuting, but for many other journeys they'll use an older car. And Defender's an example. Defender's become a kind of instant classic car, and there you're starting with a car that frankly doesn't handle very well and doesn't have very good performance, and so the tuning of it is kind of bringing it up a bit, perhaps to be a bit more like a modern car. And there's certainly a very big industry adding things to Defenders, whether it's cosmetic or for expeditions or for tuning. Big brakes, bigger different tyres, bigger engines or more powerful engines, all those things are happening, and I think that carries through into the whole classic car industry. If you have a very unique Aston Martin, perhaps you should keep it absolutely standard because it's a kind of historical piece. But if a lot of classic cars are not that rare, and it's they're great fun to tune, they're great fun to modernise, and bring kind of up to modern standards so that they're daily usable cars. But without all of these driver aids.
Following on from what Tom said about the Up, we've been involved with the brakes on the Up GTI for Miltech and improving the ability for the Up to perform on the road, to be driven enthusiastically, but as Tom said, within the limits of the road, gives a lot of enjoyment. We've noticed the small car market really growing, from journalists promoting the fact that the new Ford Fiestas are some of the best driving cars on the roads today, not just for that market, in the whole of the sort of performance car world, whether that's RS6s or BMW M4s. A lot of journalists are saying if you want to have fun on the road, the Ford Fiesta ST is a great way to go, and we're finding that that's our biggest selling product at the moment, because the people can do light modifications, improve the car's handling, braking and noise, and get lots of enjoyment from that car without exceeding road limits, and I think that's really important for the industry.
Following on again, the Caterham 3-cylinder car that was produced a few years ago was aimed just at enthusiastic drivers for the road, not necessarily the track guys, but again there are tuning opportunities with different induction, different exhaust systems, different brakes on a 3-cylinder car that essentially had struggled to beat the speed limit, and you can slide about and have some fun on a track day if you want to as well.
Yep. So when we see speed limiters, driver aids increasingly on cars, has that trend in the new car industry, has it impacted you in a way that you've had to change the way you go to market or the products that you bring to market?
When it comes to brakes, driver aids such as ECS, traction control, ABS, you do have to work within those limitations. The more a car manufacturer originally puts on aids, the more you have to take them into account. So if you make a powerful brake system, you have to be aware that the restriction of that system can actually be controlled by the car, not the performance of the system. So it has to work. We make parts that in conjunction with the driver aids. You have to work with the ABS systems and the traction control systems. It's now a case that most modern cars have an ECU that just looks after the brake system. So we can now plug into that ECU and drive the car with a live feedback of what the brake system is doing. So not just like it used to be an ECU just looked after the performance side of the car. Now there's an ECU for the suspension and an ECU for the brake. So you have to just get on board with it and realise that electronics are becoming fundamentally part of car tuning. So you've got to integrate with them for the car to work well.
Are you involved in consultation for this kind of legislation, or do you think that the industry needs to do more to be involved in shaping this kind of legislation that affects all road users?
We have been involved in influencing legislation, but not specifically about speed limiters and driver aids. I think there would be a case for the industry trying to counter this impression that safety is all about limiting things, and going back to perhaps a view that says actually a person who sets out to drive a car should take a bit of responsibility.
Legislation sets the goalposts for the manufacturers and tuners and performance houses to work within, but cars are always going to be fun. If you're coming to the Performance and Tuning Car Show, you'll see a really busy, exciting industry geared up around making driving exciting.